Everyone thinks of changing the world, but no one thinks of changing himself. This insightful saying by Tolstoy is a valuable reminder for all of us to reflect inwardly. The renowned 19th century Russian author suggested that we ask ourselves what God really wants us to do. As Leo Tolstoy said, "In the name of God, stop a moment, cease your work, look around you." A novel by Tolstoy is not a work of art, but a piece of life, stated Matthew Arnold, a 19th century British poet and critic. In addition to his renowned epic novels, Leo Tolstoy wrote essays and letters that conveyed the spiritual truths he came to realize in life. Along with adopting and promoting the vegetarian diet, he became deeply interested in spirituality and living by the ethical teachings of Christ. The concepts he conveyed through his writings about peace and the fulfillment of God's will greatly influenced 20th century leaders like Mahatma Gandhi and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Supreme Master Thanh Hải spoke about the uplifting nature of Leo Tolstoy's work during a group meditation session with our association members in July 1997 in Los Angeles, USA.
Because Tolstoy was a practitioner, That's why when you read his story, almost a story about spirituality, about God, and very happy, very positive. It's very good to read him, to read his book. You try. If you haven't, you try. You can read more, Such thing is very good for you.
We would like to share with you an insightful excerpt from Volume 2 of The Pathway of Life, called On Refraining. On refraining, men spoil their lives not so much by failing to do what they ought to do, as by doing that which they ought not to do. Therefore, the greatest effort man requires in the attainment of a good life is to refrain from doing that which he ought not to do. A good life requires restraint above all else. There is one thing which is most essential to all men. It is to live a good life. To live a good life, however, means not so much to do the good things which we can do as to refrain from doing the evil things which we can leave undone. All men of our present age know our life is evil, and they do not only condemn the order of our life, but do things which in their opinion should make life better. But life, instead of improving, grows thereby steadily worse. Why is it so? Because men adopt the most intricate and ingenious expedients, but fail to do the simplest and easiest thing. They do not abstain from participation in those things which make our life evil. A man can only then know what he ought to do when he clearly understands what he ought not to do. Refraining from doing that which he ought not to do, he will inevitably do the things which he ought to do, though he may not realize why he is doing that which he does. Question: what is best to do when you are in a hurry? Answer: nothing. When courage fails, you act towards yourself as towards an invalid, but in particular undertake nothing. If you are in doubt how to act, whether to do a thing or not to do it, know in advance that it is always better to forbear than to do. If you are not able to restrain yourself, or if you know for a certainty that the deed is good, you will not debate with yourself whether to do it or not to do it. But if you debate with yourself, then in the first instance, you know you can refrain from doing it, and further you may be sure that the thing is not wholly good. If it were wholly good, you would not debate with yourself. If you desire something so much that you feel you cannot restrain yourself, do not trust yourself. It is untrue that a man cannot restrain himself from anything. Only he cannot restrain himself who has in advance convinced himself that he cannot restrain himself. Let every man, even a mere youth, examine his life, and if you regret but once having refrained from doing even that which is good and which you ought to do, there will be hundreds of instances causing you to regret having done that which is not good and which you ought not to have done. Consequences of unrestraint. Less harm results from not doing that which we ought to do than from failing to forbear doing that which we ought not to do. Lack of restraint in one action weakens our power of restraint in another. The habit of unrestraint is a secret current beneath the foundation of a house. Such a structure is bound to collapse. It is worse to overdo than not to do enough. It is worse to be hasty than to be tardy. The pangs of conscience are keener for what you have done than for what you have failed to do. The more difficult is a situation, the less action it calls for. It is by activity that we generally spoil that which is commencing to mend. The majority of men known as mean have become so through accepting their evil temper as something lawful and through yielding to it without making an effort to restrain themselves. If you feel that you have not the strength to restrain yourself from a physical craving, the cause will be found in the fact that you failed to restrain yourself when you could, and the craving has become a habit. Not all activity is worthy of respect. It is a great error to think that activity as such, without taking into consideration what it consists of, is something honorable and worthy of esteem. The question is, wherein does this activity consist and under what conditions does the person concerned refrain from action? People frequently proudly abstain from innocent amusements, saying that they have no time for them, that they are busy. Yet, apart from the fact that a good-natured and merry game is more needful and important than many kinds of business, the very business for the sake of which they forego pleasure is frequently of such nature that it were better left undone. Fussy superficial activity is not only unnecessary, but is directly harmful to the genuine progress of life. Without the distractions afforded by the labors of others, doing nothing is a most painful condition, if it be not filled with inner labors, and therefore if a man lives outside of a state of luxury, which is furnished by the labor of others, he will not be idle. The principal harm does not come from idleness, but from doing that which is unnecessary and is injurious. Elated viewers, thank you for joining us on today's Words of Wisdom.